In this video, we're having a look at where complications can arise from a vehicle slowing down. In the animation, we'll see the driver of the green vehicle. As he's traveling along, he starts slowing down in order to try to find a parking spot. The driver behind him not quite paying attention and rear ends him. In the real life clip, have a look at this scenario. We've got a vehicle that's waiting to turn left. This vehicle behind, the vehicle waiting to turn, starts to slow down. The vehicle behind him sees him slowing down and wants to move across to the right-hand lane to avoid any stationary vehicles ahead of him. He perhaps notices that just to the right of him is a vehicle that's coming past, and he tries to time his movement across the lane to be exactly after this vehicle has passed him. But what he doesn't bank on is that this vehicle now actually starts slowing down as well. And because he miscalculates, he actually rides into that vehicle. So let's watch the real life clip. So the point to take away from this real life clip is be careful when you anticipate the movement and the motion of other vehicles and try to judge your movement or the maneuver that you're going to carry out based on predicting where they're going to be at a point in time. Always make sure before you carry out a maneuver that the lane is clear, that your path is clear. And don't just assume that because you've seen a vehicle traveling in a certain direction at a certain speed that you know where it's going to be, but rather make sure just prior to carrying out that maneuver, as you can see in this particular clip where the driver had miscalculated. Here we have a pedestrian crossing, or zebra crossing as it's called in some places. But what happens is often at such a crossing, vehicles unexpectedly slow down. Now they should slow down, especially if there are pedestrians crossing or if you approach such a crossing. But it can be unexpected for other drivers who are not paying attention to what's going on, and that's what happens in this real life clip. You see that the vehicle starts slowing down, but there is a vehicle traveling at speed, doesn't anticipate that vehicles are going to be slowing down, and so actually rides into the vehicle ahead of him that has slowed down. So such a crossing is often a cause of accidents and incidents because one may not be, as I said, paying attention, not looking far ahead enough of you to see what vehicles are doing. So that's one of the tips to take away here. Don't just look at what's happening directly ahead of you, but look at a few vehicles ahead. And we'll see it also later in another real life clip. I'll bring out that same point. But try and pay attention well ahead of you of what's taking place with vehicles so that you can anticipate any vehicle slowing down. In this next real life clip, what's likely happened in this scenario is that you've got a vehicle that was traveling in the right-hand lane in the direction that he's facing. Right-hand lane decides to move across to his left because he wants to take a turn into the side road. We've got a vehicle that's just come around the corner, and he may have looked up ahead and seen that the lane is clear, so doesn't anticipate that there are going to be any vehicles in his path, only to be caught by surprise when he sees that there is a vehicle that's slowed down and almost come to a stop in that lane, and so tries to quickly swerve out the way, but it's too late. It actually catches this vehicle in the rear. So the takeaway from this real life clip is to always be observant of what's happening. If you were the driver of the vehicle that was coming around the corner, don't just assume because you've looked ahead and the lane is clear that it's going to stay that way. Things change in the blink of an eye, so always be observant of what's happening around you. Don't just assume things are going to continue as such, but could change rapidly, and always be in expectation that things are in fact going to go wrong. In this real life clip, there's a couple of points I want to actually bring out. And the one is following distance. So you see the vehicles are traveling fairly slowly. So make sure you've got enough of a distance between yourself and the vehicle ahead to avoid any sort of bumper bashing. But in addition to that, it also allows you a bit of a buffer zone if the vehicle behind you is encroaching too close to you, tailgating you, or is approaching you at a fair speed, so that you actually have that buffer zone ahead of you to try and accelerate and pull out the way, or to look for an escape route. And that's the second point that we'll discuss. We'll have a look at this clip to start off with, and then we'll also see this particular situation from the rear camera as well. There we go. So collided by a vehicle behind him. Same scene from the rear camera. So the point I want to make here is, as I mentioned in the introduction to this section on rear, is to always be aware of what's happening behind you, not just what's happening in front of you. Try and anticipate vehicles approaching you, maybe to accidentally rear end you, and so be aware of that. So had the driver been more alert to what was happening behind him, he would have noticed that this vehicle is approaching at speed. And if he had planned an escape route, he would have noticed that just to the side of him, this is the rear camera, but facing forwards, he would have had space. Just to the left of him, you'll see that these vehicles are a little bit over to the side of the lane, so there is a bit of an escape route to the side. And had he just moved over to his left slightly, he would have avoided contact with the vehicle that was fast approaching from behind. So there it catches him just on the rear right corner, and he still had a bit of space on the side, so had he just moved slightly over, he could have avoided this incident. In this animation, the point I want to make here is that if you're planning to pull off into a side road, and we can see this is more of a main road, a higher speed road. So if it's your plan to move over into a side road turn, as the driver of the green vehicle is going to do, then two things: signal your intentions well before the time. You can see there's a driver of a yellow vehicle following up fairly closely to the driver of the green vehicle. So turn, put on your turning signal or your indicator well ahead of time to signal your intentions. That alerts the driver that you will be slowing down and turning off to the side road. But in addition to that, where space allows, then start pulling off to the side of the road to allow space for the vehicle behind you now to overtake. One can see that there's a solid white line. So had the driver of the green vehicle just kept in the lane, slowed down, and then turned to the right, he wouldn't have allowed that gap or the space for the vehicle behind him to be able to overtake. He would have been forced to either slow down, maybe irritated because the driver ahead of him is impeding his motion and his speed, or alternatively, he would have been forced to actually cross the solid white line. But we see that in the animation that the driver of the green vehicle does the correct thing. So there starts pulling over to the side of the lane, allows the space for the vehicle behind him to pass. In the real life clip, we'll see that there's an ambulance up ahead in the right lane, wanting to turn around just a junction in the road there, a fork in the road, but doesn't get out of the way of these vehicles traveling in this lane. So the rear of the ambulance is still sticking out into the lane and causes complications for these drivers. So there, a bit of a collision as a result of that. This vehicle had slowed down to avoid the ambulance, but the driver behind him now has made connection. the ambulance driver could have pulled more over to the side so that he allowed the lane to be clear. And had he done so, probably this incident could have been avoided. So if you're going to be doing something similar to this, make sure that you're out of the lane and that you pull off to the side well ahead of the time so that you allow the vehicles that space to be able to pass. In this real life clip, what I want to indicate is two things here as well. The camera is wanting to pull into the right-hand lane. So now he's waiting for this driver to come past. But when you're in a situation where you're waiting for a vehicle to pass so that you can pull into that lane, try to allow enough of a gap after the vehicle has passed you before you actually move into the lane. Because if you time it to move into the lane just after the vehicle has passed, then there's not going to be much of a gap between yourself and the vehicle who's just passed you. So the camera doesn't do that. He moves straight across into the lane. Now you can see there's not much of a following distance. One needs to have a fair following distance in order to have that buffer zone and safety in case the vehicle in front of you slows down or comes to a stop. So that's the one thing. So the camera hadn't allowed enough of a gap. He pulled into the lane soon after this vehicle had passed. Rather wait and allow more space before you pull into the lane. That's the one thing. Now notice what happens as we run the clip here. So this vehicle is slowing down. He's actually put on his hazard lights to warn the camera, the vehicle behind him, that he's coming to quite a rapid slowdown. But there's something else that happens here as well. So there we go. Did you notice that in addition to slowing down, he actually connected with the vehicle in front of him? So where that happens, that the vehicle in front of you now actually collides or makes contact with the vehicle ahead, then it means this vehicle is going to slow down even quicker than had he braked harshly. And so the camera hadn't allowed for that. There wasn't enough of a gap to start off with, even with him just braking, but due to the fact that he's now connected the vehicle in front of him, he's come to even more of a rapid slowdown. And so the camera doesn't have that buffer zone in order to stop in time, and so he collides into the back. So this is a very important point. As you following vehicles, just consider to yourself, what if the vehicle in front of you actually collides with a vehicle ahead that perhaps you hadn't noticed? That vehicle is going to come to such a rapid stop. And now, do you have that space ahead of you in order to try and either slow down or to take some or other avertive action in order to try and avoid the vehicle ahead of you? So it's not just a case of thinking, oh, well, I can try and mimic the driver ahead of me so that if he slows down, I'll slow down. If he speeds up, then I can speed up. No, it might be unanticipated that he strikes that vehicle ahead, comes to a sudden stop, and then you don't have the time to react. In this real life clip, we'll see that the driver ahead of the camera brakes quite harshly. So that means now that the camera in turn has to brake quite harshly. And because of that, the vehicle or the driver behind him doesn't anticipate that and now rear ends the camera, or the camera rather. So I'm just going to stop it at this point. As we run it, you'll see that the camera is rear-ended by the vehicle behind him. But the point just to highlight here is, don't just think in terms of whether you're able now to stop in time because the vehicle in front of you is braking harshly. So it's not only that factor to take into consideration, but also what's happening behind you. You might be able to brake harshly, stop in time as the camera did, but is the driver ahead of you aware of what you're doing so that he now has the time and the distance and space to be able to stop without rear-ending you? So whenever you're going to brake harshly, be cognizant of what's happening behind you so that you can take some or other corrective action if he's not able to stop in time. And that's the other point I want to bring out here, that had the camera been aware of what's happening behind him, he would have noticed the driver is going to rear-end him. And so he actually has space now to have moved off into the left here. this little area to the left, and he could have avoided being rear-ended. We'll see as we run the clip that there is a vehicle coming down the right-hand lane, so he didn't have the space to move to the right, so that wasn't a feasible escape route, but to the left there was. There we go. You see bumper bashing from the back. So if we're aware of what's happening around us and we can pre-plan our escape route, then it makes it much easier for us to be able to avoid any sort of collision. In the next real-life clip, just a couple of points to bring out here as well. The first is to be well aware of what's happening, not only directly in front of you, but a number of vehicles ahead. So we'll see from the camera's perspective that there's a truck driver, just this one that's in the center of what I'm highlighting here, and this driver now pulls off into the side lane. So he moves out of the way without being collided at all, but his action causes the vehicles behind him to have to slow down, so that they do so to an extent that the camera actually now goes and collides with the vehicle ahead of him. So had the camera been more alert to what was happening a few vehicles ahead of him, he could have already taken that action to start slowing down. So that's the one point. The second point is that for this truck driver, don't slow down in the lane where you're going to impede the movement and the speed of vehicles behind you. We see there's enough of a runoff zone here so that he could have pulled over to the side here before slowing down. And if he needed to go back to a certain point, well then rather pull off, travel a bit further and then reverse safely to the point you want to get to, but don't slow down in the lane where there's higher speed traffic. Rather pull off to the side, then you start slowing down, provided of course you've got the space to be able to do that. And so this driver did have that space to do that. Instead he rather slowed down within the lane, was traveling very slowly when he pulled off, and this had the compound effect of the vehicles behind him now actually colliding. And this is one of the causes of a pileup as well, and we've got a video later on pileups. In this real life clip, there are 2 points here that I also want to bring out as well. Firstly, where you've got a vehicle ahead of you that restricts your visibility of what's happening ahead, then one needs to follow at even a further distance than what would be normally acceptable. What's normally acceptable? Well, the 2-second rule applies. And I do have a separate page on the website that covers this gap, the 2-second rule. I'll put a link to that in the description section of this video below. So as you're driving along, try to maintain that 2-second rule. And when we run the clip, I'll show you what I do to try and estimate that 2-second rule. So this is the first point. One needs to maintain even more of a gap than that normal 2-second rule where your visibility is restricted, such as we can see in the vehicle ahead of us. Because as we mentioned a little bit earlier, if this vehicle was suddenly to collide with anything in front of it and we don't maintain that gap, we're not going to be able to have that buffer zone to be able to respond appropriately or in time to avoid a collision. So as I run it, what I do to time this 2-second gap is I look for a marker on the road. So it might be a shadow that crosses the road, and then I count 1,000, 2,000. And only after I've finished counting 2,000 should I then myself pass that mark on the road. So then you can estimate if you're too close or not. And this 2-second rule works irrespective of the speed that you're traveling. So if we run it, and I'm going to take the shadow that's across the road here and then start counting 1,000, and you can see I hardly got to 1,000 1 second. So this camera is actually following at closer than the distance that he should. So when I've halved the distance, 1 second is in fact even closer than that. So if you try and do this and you get into the habit of doing this as you're traveling along, you become a lot more accurate in being able to maintain that 2-second gap. In this next real life clip, what we're showing are vehicles once again slowing down. The camera doesn't anticipate that, and so lands up colliding with the vehicle ahead of him. So the drivers may have slowed down, rightly so, because of the cattle that are on the side here, and cattle are unpredictable, as is the case with any animal, that they might suddenly run across the road. So where you see a situation like this, vehicles have slowed down in anticipation of anything happening here, then you likewise need to slow down as well. But we see the camera doesn't do that. He still maintains a speed that is unreasonable for this particular scenario and lands up colliding with the vehicle ahead of him. So the camera could also have been distracted by the vehicles that were on the side, and the cattle, maybe he was looking at that instead of paying attention to what's happening ahead. I'm not sure why this vehicle had slowed down or even come to a stop in the position that he had. There doesn't seem to be any restriction ahead of him. There's no roads that he's going to be turning off to, and so it was probably quite unexpected that this vehicle would have slowed down to the extent that he had, and so caught the camera by surprise. In this last real life clip, I've included this just to show an escape route. So what the camera does here is exactly the correct thing. You can see it's snowy or icy conditions, and so the road surface is more slippery, which means that the braking distance is going to be longer. When the camera sees that he's going to be approaching the vehicle ahead of him at too high a speed in order to be able to brake or stop in time, it takes an escape route to the side here, which is exactly the correct thing to do. So rather do that and suffer whatever damages there might be from poles or any obstructions to the side, as opposed to striking the vehicle ahead of you, which is going to be a lot more costly and may result in injuries as well. In this animation, what we have is the vehicle tapering off and narrowing, and so we've got this larger vehicle, a bus, now heading towards the pointy end of this tapered section. So that constricts the flow of the dual lanes. So we'll find that the driver of the green vehicle has to slow down because he doesn't have the space to overtake the bus. And because of his slowing down, the driver of the red vehicle behind him is not anticipating this, doesn't leave enough of a gap, and so they ends up colliding with the driver of the green vehicle. So real life clip to demonstrate this. The road narrows there. We've got a bus in this lane now moving across, which causes this driver to now have to slow down. The camera is not paying attention and following too closely and lands up colliding with this vehicle.
please like, subscribe, and get notified.